Improvements on the defensive front could start at the second level. But the question is switching out a certain linebacker the answer? Or maybe the fact that there's a certain guy who's not on the field consistent enough may be the solution. Or maybe the Carolina Panthers are just missing a piece that could be selected in the draft or free agency. I'll have the answer for you here on this edition of Growlin' and Prowlin'. Welcome back, Prowlers. Thank you all so much for growling along with us on this edition of Growlin' and Prowlin'. Again, you are joined by the one and only Mr. CeeLo. And Growlers, if you guys haven't been paying attention, and some of you have not, you guys have seen that I have put out a new show. I'm trying to keep at least once a week, hopefully a couple more weeks as more as news drops. But guys, we're leading up to the Combine, which will start, I think, this weekend. Well, it's either this weekend or next weekend. I have to get my math right, get my dates right. But guys, this is a critical draft and free agent period for us. Reason being, many of the drawbacks that you get when you get into the playoffs is where you select. And ultimately, we're not exactly selecting from a place of, I would say, gold mine. You know, we've got a situation where we need certain players, and there's a lot of talk about doing away with one or two. And I'm not going to get so deep into where we need to go in a certain other positions. I'm mostly worried about that second level, which most people would refer to as the secondary, but I refer to it as the linebacking core. You know, we pretty much established our front four, or front three in our case, but that could be in jeopardy too if many analysts have their way and we do away with A'Shawn Robinson, a guy who for the most part has accumulated 68 tackles last season. No, excuse me, 65. And had 2.5 sacks. So I want y'all to know that. That's not going to be the subject of tonight's show. But while everybody's discussing, you know, cutting away $10.5 million worth of cap space, we'll also be losing 65 tackles and 2.5 sacks on that defensive line. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but let's compare it to Derek Brown, who had 73 tackles this season and 5 sacks. Coupled with the fact that Turk Wharton couldn't stay on the field, Cam Jackson couldn't really give us anything as a youngster, and, you know, the issues that we dealt with LeBron Ray as well as the edge guys. So when you really, and Bobby Brown, who was a somewhat of a disappointment considering I still thought he played well clogging up the middle, but realistically, people, I want to discuss the linebacker, Christian Rozeboom. Many of the PFF grades he got were some of the worst. I think he was ranked 73rd as far as PFF goes. And guys, I want to give y'all a little something. And this guy led the team in tackles last season with a total 122, had 2 sacks, and of course he had that, of course, 7 tackles for losses. No, an interception, a big interception in a game. I think it was the Tampa Bay game. But I understand what everyone's frustration is with Christian Roseboom. I get it. I mean, when you look at the PFF grades, and guys, a lot of times the PFF grades. I mean, J.C. Horn had his share of bad PFF grades last season. And none of them were games where he got burned for touchdowns or he got burned for big plays. Sometimes PFF doesn't always take into account the little things, and realistically, I think that letting him walk and see greener pastures may not necessarily be the best move, because while, yes, he did miss some tackles and took bad angles on certain plays, I get it. But when you got a guy that's accumulated 122 tackles, that's nothing to sneeze at. His coverage could be better, and I mean, I've seen the criticisms, I've seen the critiques that people have made about Christian Roseboom. But realistically, I still think this is a guy that needs to be a large piece of this, because really we don't have enough bodies and we don't know what we're going to get out of Trevin Wallace. I mean, when we sit back and we look at what Trevin Wallace did in his 12 games, he did have 61 tackles and 2 sacks. And he is much better in coverage, but these injuries, they're a problem, you guys. The injuries are an issue with Trevin Wallace. And I like the kid. I like Christian Roseboom. I think the issue you run into is when you have such a narrow depth chart at these. I mean, we've had other guys that came in this year. I mean, we had Boogie Basham come in. We had guys like Thomas Incoon, Bam Scott Martin, and, Claude Sherrillis gave us some really good snaps. But realistically, guys, we cannot continuously dump, guys. And I want to say this right now. There are a lot of people, including people on 99 The Fan, and people on certain programs, that say we're not 1 or 2 guys away. I beg to differ. Guys, let's not forget we took the Los Angeles Rams to the brink. To the brink. Now, a lot of y'all going to say, well, the Bears did too. We didn't need a miracle to secure comeback in that game. We didn't need a miracle. And I think we finished, let me just throw that out there, because the NFL league is a 1-score league. And this is, I think it's 7 points or less. The Carolina Panthers were 7-4 last season. That's 11 of their 17 games were games that were considered close games. That means basically 1 possession, not 8 points, 7 points. 7 points or less, we were 7-4 in those games. You cannot say what a team is capable of. And I think the Bears were like 8-1 or something, 9-1 and something in close games. And people are all talking about they're ready to take the next step. Really? You have to realize that one season you could be up and the next season you could be down. And so what I'm saying is, so many of our analysts are antagonists or pessimists, if you will, about what we were able to accomplish this season. And I'm not one of those. I think ultimately, even with the flaws we had with Christian Roseboom and some of the other players, we still made a hack at it. I want y'all to understand something. A lot of these analysts think you have to have the perfect roster to win a championship. Look, Seattle didn't have the perfect roster. Everybody knew that defensive interior was their weakness. New England Patriots exposed it for a moment, and then the Seattle Seahawks adjusted. My biggest issue is that we've got an underrated secondary. Our defensive linemen do a pretty darn good job of keeping blockers off of our linebackers to the point that they can go and make plays. Guys like, as well as our safeties, when you guys got like Trayvon Merrick, who ended up with 111 tackles, and Nick Scott had 111 tackles, and Trayvon Merrick had 103 tackles and 3 sacks, along with one interception. But the reality of it is, I do agree we should get more aggressive at the linebacking core. Do I think Christian Roseboom and Trevin Wallace should still be a part of that? Absolutely. I ultimately think that what goes down at the first 18 picks is going to have a huge bearing on where we go. But here's the thing. We can't dictate free agency that way. I'm a wholehearted believer that when I look at the 4 top linebackers that I'm absolutely in love with. Now, this is just for the first round for our 19th pick, you guys. I do have one guy that is not on my list currently. Yes. Yeah. I got him. Ultimately, when you look at the first round, the most important thing you look at, for me, I love size at every position, you guys. If you guys watch my show, I love size, whether it's safety, corner, nickel, linebacker, defensive tackle, and edge rusher. Those arms are just absolutely imperative when it comes to every position on the defense and even on the offensive line. Coming from a short guy, I love size. I love it. I absolutely love it because it is impossible to even in basketball, you guys, from being a former football and basketball coach, guys, size is just absolutely horrible to deal with as an offensive player. And guys, we got a basketball team out there as a receiving core. The real reason why I'm gonna deviate a little bit. The real reason why I look at this team and I say we gave the Rams a run. Look at what you got in your secondary. Your number 1 is 6'1". Your number 2 is 6'2", 6'3", and Mike Jackson. Here's the thing that I say all the time. You can't teach size. Those are intangibles you can't teach. You can't teach a guy to be 6'3". You can't teach a guy to be 6'2", 6'4", 6'5". Ask T-Mac. Ask Jalen Coker. The reason I'm going at this is because when you look at the top guys, now I will say this, do I think when you look at the board and you see guys like Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles, whom both are 6'4", are clocked at possibly 4.5, 4.4s, which is impeccably fast for a linebacker. Now, a lot of people will say that's average, but you've got some linebackers on here that are 4.6 and high 4.5s. And Arvell Reese is a guy, and a lot of y'all will probably say I'm nuts for saying this, but Arvell Reese is a guy that I think we should definitely look at and kind of, flirt with. Because ultimately, if you can get him, now I do think that Sonny Styles and C.J. Allen out of Georgia are good selections. The only issue I got with C.J. Allen, he's 6'1", but he's 235 pounds, and he has some ability to run blitz the quarterback. So does Sonny Styles, and Arvell Reese is a guy that looks like what you call a utility knife on the defensive side of the ball, especially with that size. And when you can get that kind of speed and reaction time from these guys. Now, I will say this. What concerns me is how Miami was able to run the football against Ohio State in that semifinal game. That concerned me. That really concerned me in the college football playoff because, now I will say that defensive line for Ohio State is not your typical defensive front you've seen over the last 4 or 5 seasons. But you were still seeing these guys in there making plays. Just Miami had arguably one of the best fronts in college football this season. But back to what I was going at. I think this is going to be our wheelhouse because ultimately you don't want to take a left tackle with that 19th pick. And he's not one of the big 3. But C.J. Allen is looking like a guy who could very well be there. Now, we could be fortunate enough. Now, they've got him the average overall rank as 19.5, which means he could fall to us. Now, what I throw out there to you, Panther Nation, there's Sonny Styles, who's 6'4", 243 pounds. And then there's a guy by the name of Jake Galladay, 6'4", 240 pounds. Galladay, you're buying the body, the speed, and the trajectory more than the finished product. So with that being said, this is a guy that, now he is going to be, Galladay's a guy that could go possibly in the late second round, which we have a late second round pick. We're 51st. So the question is, if it's not CJ Allen, now don't get me wrong, Anthony Hill is 6'3", 238 pounds. He's very quick from one point to the next, which is what you need out of a linebacker. Didn't see a whole lot of crazy, ridiculous plays on his film, but he's a stout run stuffer. Some blitzing ability. And then we've heard people say something about Deontay Lawson. He's ranked as the a high third. I don't think this is a guy that you can really, to me, he's 6'2", 228, kind of light. You know, this is a light guy, and I'm not really big on light linebackers. I think a linebacker needs to be up, north of 230. And when you look at a guy that's like a Anthony Hill / CJ Allen, see, Anthony Hill's got a projection of 44.9, which means he's a middle of the way second round pick. The reason I say these things, guys, is we need a guy in the middle of that defense or on the weak side that can bring the lumber, that can stop these runs that are going to get 2-3 yards as opposed to one in the hole or a tackle for a loss that is instinctive. And then what you get out of guys like Sonny Styles and Anthony Hill is some pretty good coverage. These guys are pretty darn good when you look at what you want out of a hybrid type linebacker, not a triple hybrid. That's a guy that can do it on all three levels. You got a guy that can blitz, you got a guy that can stop the run, and a guy that can cover. And where Carolina struggled a lot last year in its passing game was the middle of the field. Now, the one thing I'm hoping Coach Avero does a better job of this season, because Derek Brown does this, Ashawn Robinson does this, but we've got to get another guy in there that is getting their hands up on those passes across the middle. We did not get enough of these passes batted down. That was a big problem, in my opinion. I think Derek Brown, according to this, had 7 knockdowns. Ashawn Robinson had 3. And realistically, that's what we got to go for. When you get a linebacker that is out there in coverage, you help him out immensely when you got guys that are getting their hands up at the line of scrimmage when they're not getting pressure. That's the other thing. We can get the best cover linebacker in this draft. At some point, Avero's got to go aggressive. You can't just say, hey, we're running the 3-4, but we're not doing... Look at what Seattle did. Guys, I was absolutely salivating when I watched this team. And if Avero didn't watch it firsthand when they came to us, what more do you need? There are some changes that need to be made to this defense. You can't run a 3-4 and then get in a situation where you're just playing back cover 3 and you've got the corners in J.C. Horn, Mike Jackson, that can pretty much cover pretty daggum good. And you probably only have one more season with Mike Jack unless you go ahead and you extend him this year. I think it's worth it, but that's not the show. If you guys won't, put a 1 in the comments if you think we should extend Mike Jackson. But guys, looking down this list, we're talking about the draft, and then I'm going to get into free agency. But I like these guys. I like Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, CJ Allen, Anthony. I love Anthony Hill if he could fall to the 51st pick. But right now the average is looking more along the lines of like somewhere around 40, something like that. But if he fell to number 51, we gotta pounce on that. Literally, pounce on that. Jake Galladay is an interesting prospect, but the one I look at, and a guy whom, the only issue that I really have with the last guy that I really like is Jacob Rodriguez, the kid out of Texas Tech. Now, if you guys watch Texas Tech this season, guys, he's not the fastest guy, but for some reason, he just looks faster on the field. 6'1", 233 pounds. They got him listed as a 4.7 grade, 4.7 speed. But did you guys watch Texas Tech and see how many plays this guy made? Now, I get it. It was BYU, and then, of course, when you got to see them in, I don't want to say it, but in a real matchup, look, Rodriguez is a pretty darn good player. Pretty darn good player on that Texas Tech defense. But what I will say about it is if we don't take linebacker here, he could be a great consolation prize in the third round. That's just my spot on that. But as I said, the list of guys that I'm happy with, I will say Jacob Rodriguez, Jake Galladay, Anthony Hill Jr., C.J. Allen, Sonny Styles, and of course Arvell Reese. Let me know which one of you guys, which one of those guys that you're would absolutely be stoked if they actually came to the Carolina Panthers. Now, I want to read something interesting to you guys. I'm sorry, I lost my place. Many of you don't believe this until I tell you, but the Panthers defense ranked 16th last year. Now, just in case you don't know, that ranked outside of the top 14, which means there's 14 teams that go to the playoffs. Not bad for a team that allowed 31.4 points a game and only allowed 23.8 points a game. Now, a lot of that could be because of the level of competition that we played. But here's the thing, guys. While so many out there are talking about getting another receiver, we got to think delicately. Dave Canellis is not utilizing all of his guys. The perfect game that we saw was not the 30-0 game that we saw out of the Carolina Panthers. The perfect game was the other game against the Falcons. Now, see, while others look at that 30-0 game against the Falcons the first time as being the perfect game, no. It was a perfect defensive game, but the Atlanta Falcons had a lot to do with that, let's be honest. But then let's also look at the second matchup where Bryce threw for 455. We have the arsenal. Canellis has to stop putting himself in a position where he's just looking for one guy to go to. You don't need T-Mac to have 100 grabs. You don't need Coker to have 70. You don't need Leggett. Yes, I said Leggett. The fact of the matter is he hasn't been utilized correctly either, and neither have our tight ends. Jimmy Horn Jr. This is where Canellis needs to stop vacationing and stop being scared and use them right. When he had to face the Falcons, he had no choice. He spread that thing all over the field, and the Falcons didn't know what was hitting them. But that's not the show. We need to focus on getting this defense in the top 10 so that we can get in a situation where we can hammer home the run game. I'm hearing Jonathan Brooks is making great progression. We won't know until he gets to practice, or we won't know until he straps the pads on. Hoping and praying that he can keep that ACL healthy and we can go back to our two-headed monster. Hoping Rob Hunt can get healthy. But here on this linebacking core that we have coming into the draft, we also got to look at the fact that we were 29th in the league in sacks with 23. So we were ranked as the 7th most improved defensive unit. We saw a reduction of 83 fewer yards allowed per game compared to 2024. Now, here's a stat. Many of y'all didn't see when I did the show on Turk Wharton and I was talking about guys that haven't shown up. When Turk Wharton was in on defensive run plays, the Panthers averaged 30 more yards a game when he played in those games. Turk Wharton can be a great pass rushing addition. I mean, who knows whether he was playing hurt or not. But I'm going to be honest with you. When we saw Bobby Brown in there, a large amount of Cam Jackson, look, this defensive unit was off the hook. You can't tell me we're averaging 30 yards fewer with Turk Wharton on the bench on rundowns. I said this at the beginning of the season. Look, Turk Wharton has his place. It just ain't on rundowns. Maybe that had something to do when it was early and Trevin Wallace had the dot and not Christian Roseboom. Who knows? Or was that the other way around? But let us look at the free agents, because importantly, we're going to clear up more cap space, and of course, I'll bring you guys more updates and details on that. Of course, the jewel of this one is Devin Lloyd, having a PFF grade of 88.4. That's third among linebackers. He's the Jacksonville Jaguar linebacker, just in case you guys didn't know. He's a complete linebacker. He is top 10 in the PFF in run defense coverage and pass rush grade. Okay, so what do we need to do to get this guy? Because his services are going to be demanded. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. We don't even know what Jacksonville is going to do. Heck, they may even decide to bring him back. Can we outbid Jacksonville? Should we outbid them? If you like Devin Lloyd, put his name down in the comments. Should we go get him? Then we got Devin Bush. So I was right there. I was ahead of myself. Cleveland Browns linebacker Devin Bush produced a 60 plus PFF grade from 2019 to 2023, but he has broken out over 2 seasons with Cleveland. He finished the 25 season with an 87.6 PFF grade, you guys, ranking 4th among all linebackers. And his 3 picks was tied for 3rd in his position. So now you get this dynamic of a proven linebacker who's got experience in a defense in Cleveland that's got guys like Myles Garrett and Mason Graham on it. The reality of it is this guy going to be able to translate into what Ichiro Vero does? And seeing that this guy is a all-around type guy, not quite as all-around as Lloyd, but he does get the job done, and he's probably a guy we could possibly get a steal, but you never know. Then there's Nakobe Dean out of Philly. Now, a lot of Dean's issues have been injuries. A lot like Bush. A lot of his issues have been injuries. His season was uneven and large due to his injuries, but his strong 2024 season could bode well for his free agency outlook, or maybe not. He's a capable blitzer coming out of that Georgia system. He's generated 26 pressures over the past 2 seasons. Now, you like that blitzing ability coming from that weak side linebacker position. However, the problem with Dean is like we said, the injuries. Same thing we dealt with Roseboom. Now, here's the thing. If we could get him and then possibly tie Roseboom back at a team-friendly deal, and then you got Trevin Wallace coming back, then you got your trio of guys with a couple of guys that you can bring in as backups. But then, if you were to get one of these guys, let's say you got Devin Lloyd, do you still draft a linebacker? That's a good question. Me personally, you can never go too young, because ultimately many of y'all don't want Roseboom, and realistically, even if he came back for one more season, I guess you could say it needed to be his last. I still think we should get one of these big dogs out of the free agent pool and then go dip into the draft. Especially if we can get if we got R.L. Reese, I'd be running that card up there. R.L. Reese, Sonny Styles, or C.J. Allen, or even Anthony Hill. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't. I think we should go. I think we should go into the draft, even if we go into free agency. Because ultimately, you guys, if we can make this run defense even more effective, because I'm going to be honest with you, there were a lot of games, guys, teams like the Rams, teams like the Falcons, teams like the Bucks, they went away from the run and they were gashing us at points. Even the Falcons at times, that 30-0 game You guys go back and watch my show on that one. The Falcons handed us that game because, if I remember, Bijan was averaging 5 yards a pop. We still hadn't solved the run game problem, but the issue was that a lot of the coaches out-coached themselves. They literally coached themselves out of the game. Now, I'm not saying they totally ran all over us, but you got running backs that are gashing you for 8-9 yards and you get a couple of stops. Guess what? Your average is going to come down. Just pull up the statistics, you guys. I mean, there were teams that their backs were gashing us for 5 yards on average. And they just went away from it. Which is why it's so imperative that we get somebody that can lay the lumber and know where these plays are going, as well as understanding. This is what we got to live and breathe by, stopping the run on first and second down so we can get in those blitz opportunities and see if Avero's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think. Guys, make sure that if you subscribe or you are a first-time watcher, make sure you put your name down and where you're viewing from. Make sure if you subscribe, you also hit that bell notification so you can get my shorts and my shows as they drop. Be sure to hit the thumbs up and let me know that you like it so we can, guys, keep the engagement going. Make sure you go over to Facebook at Growlin' and Prowlin' so you can check out the things that I got going on over there, what shows you might have missed, as well as the polls that I'm going to be putting out in the group as well as on the page. Finally, go over to my Instagram at Mr. CeeLo so you can keep up with all of my off-season shenanigans that I will be caught up in. But until the next time, keep prowling the airwaves and growling out. Keep pounding.